2023 was definitely a year. I've lost loved ones with only memories to go by now, while making new memories with new loved ones this past Christmas. I shuffle around at my current job a little bit, quit my old part-time job, and now 6 months later at the end of the year have doubled my subscriber count. Not bad for someone who's trying to do this just as a fun little hobby. And as we come close to this year and prepare for the next, there's one question I simply have on my mind.
What the fuck is going on with wizards?
Yeah, WotC has not had a good year, and with all the past events that have happened, it really is just making me wonder what the hell is going on and what is going to continue to go on moving forward. So I figured with my brand spanking new microphone I got this past Christmas, I would make a rather quick thoughts video of just everything. Oh, wow. Oh, geez, I threw my voice out on that scream. But yeah, I just kind of want to do a quick recap of what's happened with them this year and kind of do some quick last-minute thoughts from all this, along with from what I've heard from others. So let's begin where it all started. Back at the beginning of this year was the whole OGL controversy. Basically, the OGL, or Open Gaming License, is a massive document that allows third parties to make D&D related content without having to pay royalties or getting sued by WotC. And this was great since we have seen a massive boom of third-party content. But I'm also pretty sure ever since the whole pandemic, people getting locked in, and massive stock increases since then, there was one thought that popped into their mind.
We've got to have money.
And because of that, they decided to fuck around. So then they tried to update the OGL, where now you would have to pay royalties, and essentially they would pay a Activision Blizzard move where any content you make, they technically own. I think I'm remembering that correctly. People were very quick to catch on to this and were not happy about it. And as the current modern saying goes, you fuck around, you find out. Many people unsubscribed from D&D Beyond, which really hurt their sales, so they had to reverse the whole process and everything's kind of back to normal. For now. The following month, Kyle Brink would still kind of be on damage control, and on one of his podcasts that he was talking with, he said this. Later then, WotC would host a massive D&D summit with a lot of content creators, but this turned out to be a massive failure, since really it was just kind of them promoting future content as well as the virtual tabletop in the worst way possible, and basically they couldn't even answer any of the questions that the creators had for them, which then just turned into a massive roast for them. But let's not have D&D have all the fun of making trouble, because later in the Magic the Gathering community, they sent the Pinkertons to collect trading cards through a whole miscommunication and weird event of distribution early. This was later followed up by raising prices of D&D content, Magic the Gathering, at least in the Commander format, raised prices, the discovery and use of AI art in the Giants book, and massive ending of partnerships later back in October. Now with all that, you would think that during the Christmas season, there would be no more controversy and you would be out of the blue. Well, no. And it's far worse than, say, Clark Griswold not getting their canceled Christmas bonus. Employees, they were not having a job, as Hasbro would then later fire over 1,100 employees, many of which came from WotC, which was more of the successful branch of Hasbro in general. All while Chris Cox said that this was unnecessary and it was a last resort. Bull fucking shit. Those are the more noteworthy events this past year that I think are worth saying, and there's plenty of other documentation on them if you really want to go deeper into detail, and I just have a few thoughts to share since I kind of want to make this very brief. The OGL is absolutely the snowball that has started this massive downward spiral for WotC. Whether, higher-ups at WotC themselves or Hasbro, they got greedy, they wanted to mess around with something so that it would still obviously make them more money, even though it practically threatened what D&D is now with like this variety of extra content that Wizards just can't really make. It's broken trust with many of like their partners. I think like Critical Role, I think, is now kind of started to take off from them. And if it didn't break the trust of all the fans, it at least shook up a lot of the trust initially. I still don't understand why Kyle Brink said what he said. This is a producer, a guy who is responsible for creating the hobby that I love to enjoy, essentially stopping and telling me, get the fuck out. And that just rubs me the wrong way that no matter how many times my friends tell me to let it go, I just can't. I think it also just kind of stops and shows a little bit maybe of more of the hypocrisy that kind of goes on with WotC staff and management. And I also think it just kind of continues to prioritize or show the Wizards' priority into like pushing more towards the new particular demographic on like who they want to market to. Believe it or not, I don't necessarily want to keep ranting and bashing on it, because I don't want to say appealing to a wider audience is bad. It's that you're going from, it's not expanding an audience, it's shifting your focus to another audience more heavily and throwing your old audience under the bus. A good vast majority of your player base are still going to be white guy grognards, the people who originally brought up the game. So, telling the vast majority to get out, or effectively telling them to get out, while trying to replace them with a smaller minority just doesn't make sense. The Creator Summit was just a disaster, period. It was much more of just they wanted to push product onto creators, and they didn't have any preparation to actually answer questions. The reveal of the virtual tabletop, I think, was a complete failure, considering the fact that it's just showing a bunch of people gathering around in a single room around a single table, but instead of looking at each other, they're looking down at these like very high-end gaming PCs, which are undoubtedly very expensive. I think this also just generally shows like more the direction that WotC wants to go, and like pushing more of a digital format, something that then is probably easier for them to monetize, as one of the presidents have mentioned beforehand last December, and that worries me. Price increases are just, yeah, they suck. As someone who is just kind of struggling with like kind of keeping up with a whole bunch of other hobbies right now and trying to get into other hobbies, money is kind of tight, so you have to now pay more for something is just going to be more of a turnoff for me at this point. Not to mention that the quality of their books, it's lackluster. It doesn't have bite, and even more so, it's more of this fire and forget feel where like a lot of adventures like tell you to continue your adventures like in Dragonlance, but they don't really provide any source material immediately. There's no follow-up. There's no nothing. It's just get it out and make a quick buck, essentially. And more on the topic of quality is the use of AI art that was caught in their Giants book. AI, I know, is kind of just like a hot topic right now, especially among like artists, since it's taking their jobs. And it's funny enough because earlier, at least now when I'm recording this, me and my dad went up to essentially get him moved into a new apartment, and we stopped in at a Steak and Shake. But instead of like a waiter there was just a kiosk, and you plug in your order, you wait for it, and it's all automated now. And we had a small discussion on just like how technology is just advanced and like why this stuff is being implemented, because basic reason is like, why rather raise the minimum wage for like waiters and all that staff when you can just replace them with machines and like all these other machines to like specialize patties and all that. At the same time, AI like creating artwork is far different than just taking orders. Artistry, I think, is much more of like comes down to like skill, various techniques, certain art styles, and that comes with much more of like a personal touch to it. That's something that AI can only just ever attempt to recreate. And with like even the few programs I've personally have tried playing around with, there's always more of this artificial feel to it that just, it feels uncanny. It's kind of like when you adapt to learn how to spot CGI now. There's also other implementations of, say, like art contests. If like you're going up against people and then you just win with something you didn't really like create on your own. Or even just better yet here, where it's just like now companies can potentially just even save more money by cutting out artists and just kind of winging it and maybe adjusting photos, which just, it feels cheap and lazy. And just to briefly move to the Magic side of things, it's just, why the Pinkertons? They're known for extortion, intimidation, and violence. There's a reason they are the bad guys in Red Dead 2. Why? Just why? If the common audience trust and goodwill was already shaken with the OGL, it was broken here with anyone with common sense. The loss of partnerships, I don't really have to say too much. And then, of course, one of the more bigger news that happened recently, and isn't even necessarily WotC's fault, are the massive layoffs. A lot of people got let go from, say, just like general art staff, high executive senior staff members, but also Mike Merrills, the guy who helped make 5e, and I think that's devastating. While there's definitely staff members that I would disagree with and would absolutely love to see out of the company, one, I can't be that lucky that all of them got kicked out, and two, a lot more of the innocent staff members, just people there wanting to do their jobs, getting flushed out to help save profit for their main parent company, I think is horrible before like one of the happiest times of the year. That sucks regardless for like whoever I think is working on there. But I also think it's bullshit of like Cox's statement where it's like this was a last resort when you have to stop back and think to like Nintendo when their presidents were taking like massive pay cuts when the Wii U failed to try to prevent people from being fired and let go. And meanwhile, Cox and the higher staff are just getting these massive bonuses and higher just payments for what exactly do they do to earn that? Which is why I find his statement to be such fucking bullshit. And if they really wanted to like be mindful of these employees, they could maybe just take a little pay cut for a little time. I think they've made enough over the years that they've worked there at this point. As a reminder, these layoffs happened even though WotC was being successful. So now I think this also kind of will just add two things, is that the products in general are just going to decline worse because you're now kind of working more with like, I'm guessing they want to be more like a maintenance or a skeleton crew unless they hire back up again. And two, I think it's actually going to affect a lot of the morale of the remaining staff there in thinking just even if the company is successful, even if they are successful, like they can still just get kicked out just because they need to save money. So like why put in the extra effort into something that you love if you're just going to get let go regardless? Like this is terrible. I'm not going to lie on that. I think that should close up my thoughts on just what has WotC done this year and kind of get into my final thoughts on what can WotC do moving forward now. Because what can they do? They have lost so much goodwill from stuff like the Pinkertons and the OGL scandal. Their products overall, I think, have become very lackluster. The leadership and the people making the game are just, they're kind of driving me, at least particularly me and some others, away at this point. If not driving everyone away with just continual price increases to try and meet quotas, which even if they do meet them, that's not necessarily going to guarantee jobs, and let alone get replaced in one way or another. So I just have to stop and ask, what can WotC really do at this point? And I kind of hate to be a Debbie Downer on this, but I don't think there is anything they can do. I feel like just at the current moment, they're in a death spiral. A very potentially slow death spiral. And I think now is more than a better time just to kind of start looking at third parties and just look at all the better game systems that are able to be creative and innovative and just kind of have their own unique spin in just entertainment. Because at this point, I don't think WotC or D&D in general can just be carried by brand recognition anymore. It's very sad to see such like a big recognizable brand name like Dungeons and Dragons just kind of start to crumble at this point. Oh yeah, and Chris Cox can go suck a big fat one of what he's named after.